Hi everybody, how are you doing today? Let's hope it's a nice day where you are. Otherwise, we just have to deal with what we're dealt. But we can look at it this way: the Lord allowed you to wake up this morning, so you need to do something for Him. And so think about some of the things we're going to talk about today, because everybody needs to be aware of this. The title of the lesson is, "Do you have a strategy yet?" Yeah, and what is that? Yeah, everybody needs a strategy for life. Everybody needs a strategy for all sorts of things. And what brought this to my mind is several years ago, when speaking of a radical group in the Middle East, a former president said that he did not have a strategy in dealing with them. And it's hard to believe because we know there's different organizations and think tanks out there. There's people who project many things years in advance. There's groups that are discussing weapons that have not even been invented and how to use those weapons. Generals map out a strategy, a battle plan. In ball teams, they have a offensive and defensive plan that they put into place so that they can be victorious. And we know they've had plans about, pandemics and stuff like that, and all sorts of other contingency plans for every scenario that anyone can imagine. There are battle plans drawn up with lists of supplies, with what parts of the military will be used, what we need from our allies, and the list goes on and on. And yes, there's a strategy that's been planned, but I know some people are not willing to put them in. Just about every successful business, when they sit down, they have short term and long term goals, and they put processes in place that will allow them to reach those long term goals. A lot of companies that do not learn to adapt to the consumer usually find themselves going bankrupt because they do the same thing. Well, we've done this for 40 years, we're not going to change. Guess what? They're not around anymore. Those companies that adapt, and they're the ones that will survive. Strategy should be a part of life. All of us. We all need to make plans. As you're driving down the road, you have to keep your eyes open and realize where the traffic is around you, so that in case someone maybe in front of you throws on their brakes, do you have the time to shift over and get in the other lane without running into somebody? Or do you have time to throw on your brakes and keep from hitting them? So we should be using strategy every day of our life. When you plan a meal, well, you got to get things planned out ahead of time. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. Let's say it's spaghetti. Okay, well, I'm going to cook the meat. Then I'm going to cook the noodles. I'm going to add the sauce to it. And maybe if I want some rolls or something to go with it, I'll have that planned out as well. And so, yeah, we need strategy for just about everything. And so, yes, we need to have a contingency of things that might happen. Not saying that they will. What happens? What happens if a family member dies? Have you ever thought about that? Well, yeah, you don't want to think about that. And that's the problem. But what if? What if the stock market crashes and you lose all your money? What are you going to do then? What if the banks fail? And what if the grocery stores run out of food or your money becomes worthless? What are you going to do? What if you lose your job? As we go through life, we sometimes think about these things. And sadly, many people do not have a clue. They have not considered that anything might happen to them. And oftentimes we see the young are so carefree that they fail to consider the brevity of life, how fragile life actually is. And sure, it is tragic when a young person dies, and it is often said that they had so much life left in them. But at the same time, they did not consider that their life could end at any moment. See, just turn on the news or read the newspaper and learn of people who began their day without realizing it was their last. There are literally thousands every day do not know that. And so that brings us to the point. What if you were to die tonight or this afternoon? Would you be ready to stand before God in judgment? You know, Hebrews 9:27 says that it's appointed for man once to die, and afterward the judgment takes place. So have you considered your spiritual condition and just how fragile life is? See, your duty to God is to prepare yourself for just such an occasion. And if it does not happen today, you should be preparing yourself for a later time when that appointment will be placed upon you. And that is one appointment you cannot cancel or miss. I mean, everyone is going to face this. And so many people feel that getting right with God is only for those religious nuts. And we know that. And they do not consider the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep his commandments. Ecclesiastes 12:13 tells us that. And so they are selfish and looking to satisfy any and all lust they might have. And those who occasionally worship God or go to church every now and then consider, well, they'll get right with God sometime before they get too old. Yeah, how often does that happen? It doesn't happen very often. In fact, it's very rare. And so that is not a safe strategy for your soul. The only safe strategy for your soul is to serve God now and not put off service to him. Get busy now learning about God and his will for you. Study his word so that you can know how to please him in everything. Focus your thoughts on spiritual thoughts, as we read there in Colossians 3:1 and 2, by setting our mind above where Christ is in heaven. And speaking of heaven, make sure your strategy is to get there. Whatever it takes, but there is only one way to get to heaven. The Bible tells us what that is. And so the Bible tells us how to get there. We get there only by doing the will of God that we can get to heaven. That's the only way. Doing God's will, obedience to God's will. That's the only way to get to heaven. Thinking yourself or wishing yourself into heaven is not going to work. All right. Christians need to have a strategy and be prepared for any possible problems that may arise. As preachers and teachers, we need to be aware that people are going to ask us questions trying to trip us up or trying to justify some sort of agenda, and we're going to have to be ready for that. How would we respond when they said, well, what about the thief on the cross? What about the person who dies on the way to the baptistry? I mean, how are we going to answer? We need to have these things in the back of our mind so that when and if it ever does occur, we're ready for it. When you start dealing with someone from a denomination, and you got to know what they believe so that you can teach them what they need to hear, and then the choice will be up to them. And so we also know that problems will come to those that love the Lord. We know that's going to happen. Persecution is going to happen to those who try to live godly. What was that? 2 Timothy 3:12 tells us that. But yet we also know good things come to those who love him. Romans 8:28. And so the Bible teaches us that problems will come and persecution will come, but with his help, with God's help, with the help of Jesus, we will overcome and realize the greatest victory that any man has ever had, spending eternity in heaven with God. And that is our goal, to spend eternity in heaven. And the question for everybody is, do you have a strategy to get there? And some people do not make plans, and some people don't think about these things. But folks, one day we're going to stand before God, and we're going to hear one of two things: either enter in, good and faithful servant, or depart from me, ye that practice iniquity. There is no other option. There is no waiting area. There is no middle thing called purgatory or anything like that. I mean, it's going to happen. And so, consider these thoughts. That's our lesson for today. Don't forget, for most of us, tomorrow if it's not here already, is not daylight savings time. Well, we just got to push the clock back 1 hour. Push the clock back 1 hour. But anyway, think about that and think about this lesson. Share this lesson with others. And Lord willing, we'll be back again tomorrow with another lesson. Bye-bye to now. Have a good, blessed day.